weekly live stream with Colorism Healing. I am Dr. Sarah Webb. I'm really excited about this week's topic because the audience, you all on Instagram and TikTok in particular, voted for this topic. And it is colorist friends. More specifically, how do you identify if your friends are colorists? So I'm going to give you 10 red flags that your friends might be colorists, but also 10 ways to deal with it, 10 options for dealing with it. Of course, there are more than 10 options, but for the sake of time, I'm limiting myself to just 10. Before we jump into that, make sure you say hello if you're watching live. Let me know where you're watching from and how you're feeling today. Hey, Poetic Platypus, how you doing? What's up, y'all? So I don't think I have any major announcements today, so we can get started pretty soon. I'd like to shout out my podcast listeners. Hopefully you all have noticed a big improvement in the quality of the audio on the podcast, because I realized I can record the audio separately and use my microphone. So I have my microphone here, and so I did that for y'all. It's harder to see y'all. Like, I don't know who's listening to the podcast the way I can see on Instagram and even on YouTube recordings and things like that. But I haven't forgotten about y'all. I love y'all too. So again, for folks who are just joining, the topic is colorist friends. I'm going to pin that comment now that I know about pinning comments. Colorist friends. And last week we talked about colorist fathers. And so we have these various relationships in our lives where colorism might be a factor, right? It could be a family relationship, a relationship with a parent. It could be an intimate partner, a sexual relationship. It could be a platonic relationship. It could be a work relationship or a professional relationship. And so colorism can definitely have a huge influence on various types of relationships. And so I think friendships is one area, though, that a lot of people over the years, right? So I had several people post in the comments about painful experiences they've had with friends, like on Instagram and TikTok. But over the years, people often talk about having these arguments with their friends, having these debates with their friends, sometimes losing friendships, right? And so I think it's really important to focus on that particular kind of relationship. So let me see who is joining here. I saw someone say, hey, from Texas. Hi from Texas, Westside Community Pantry, SA. Is the SA for San Antonio or something else? Am I misunderstanding that? I'm currently in Texas myself. I'm in the DFW area. So welcome, Westside Community Pantry. Hello from Connecticut. This is Viva LaQuia 15. What's up? Got the East Coast in the house. Let's see. Just in time, finally. Hello. Yay. Sig UA Pex. Ever since I started doing these lives, I was like, I am butchering screen names. I apologize. Okay, yeah. So San Antonio, Texas. Welcome. Hello from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Woo! And this is Lynn Tejeda Elliott. I recognize your username. So good. We have a lot of folks represented from different regions of the U.S. Eborina, I'm in the DF area too. Woohoo! Hey, DFW folks. All right, so 10 red flags that your friends might be colorist. Before I jump into what those warning signs or red flags might be, I want to acknowledge the fact that we can have light-skinned colorist friends, and we can also have dark-skinned colorist friends. And what I mean when I say dark-skinned colorist friends, I don't mean in the reverse colorism sense that a lot of people talk about it. What I mean is that if colorism is the systemic social marginalization of people with darker skin tones, then even dark-skinned people can marginalize and oppress other dark-skinned people, right? Even dark-skinned people can hate dark skin. Even dark-skinned people can have a quote-unquote preference or be deferential or place greater value on light and white skin. And so the colorism that we experience could come from friends of any shade, any race, any gender, right? And so I don't want anyone to think that only light-skinned friends can be colorist. In the way that I define colorism, right? where it's the devaluing and the marginalization of dark skin. Even dark skinned people can participate in that. Thank you, Sarah Bestwill, for the badge. Woohoo! It's always exciting to see my returning viewers. I'm so appreciative. Hi again from Boston, Massachusetts. Sunny in the 70s. Very cool. It's kind of cloudy today in Texas, in the DFW area anyway. All right. So first warning sign. Some of these are going to be really obvious. So I might do a second one that gets more into the nuances, but leave comments and questions in the chat about if you've seen any of these red flags in people. You don't have to name them. You don't have to name the person or the people, but just like give me a thumbs up if you've seen any of these red flags in your social circle before. So the first one, I'm sure we've all seen some version of this, is that your friend explicitly expresses a dating preference based on skin tone. How many of you have had friends that do this? And again, one of the comments left, this comment was left by, let me see their name, Tina C 1984, right, on my post announcing this live topic. And so she was talking about how she had a dark-skinned friend who only dated light-skinned guys because and wanted to have like biracial children, that sort of thing. And so seeing that could be a light-skinned friend who's like, oh, I only date light skins, or it could be a dark-skinned friend who says that, right? But that is like a telltale sign that your friend is colorist. I'm not even going to say might be colorist. I'm going to say like straight up is. Like that's a definite sign. All right, so a second sign is directly related to this, okay? And this is related to Tina's comment as well, which is that they always talk about wanting light-skinned children or quote-unquote cute babies. If you didn't see my post about how people use cute babies as a synonym for light-skinned babies, you should go check that out. But a lot of people make the dating choices that they make because they want light-skinned children, right? So sometimes it's like, oh, I'm only dating light-skinned people because I only think light-skinned is attractive. And other people are like, well, I would date a dark-skinned person. Like, I don't think dark-skinned people are ugly, but I just don't want my children to be dark-skinned. So I could never marry one or have a child by a dark-skinned person, right? And so those two things are really related in terms of why people make the dating choices they do. All right, here's a third one. So we're 3 of 10 so far. And this one is where a lot of people experience gaslighting from their friends. And that's that you might have a friend who makes jokes, quotation marks around the word jokes, about skin tone. And they really think they're funny, right? And these jokes we know are often based in stereotypes, perpetuating stereotypes, for example, about light skin being effeminate. And so like, oh, light skinned dudes always be in their feelings, or, you know, dark skinned girls, you got to watch out for them, XYZ. And like, they'll say these comments and then try to dismiss it like, oh, I was just joking. You can't take a joke, lighten up, right? So that's definitely a red flag that your friend might be colorist. And I also, as I'm saying this too, because like I say definitely is colorist or might be colorist, because there are people who are consciously colorist, like who intentionally know that they're discriminating against dark-skinned people. But then the vast majority of folks, though, are subconsciously colorist, right? So they don't have like an explicit disdain for darker skin. They don't like explicitly say they think lighter skin is better, but on that subconscious level, it's very, very much ingrained in so many people. Even people who are consciously trying to fight against colorism, who are consciously trying to change their biases, recognize, you know, patterns in how they react and respond to people, right? So you judge for yourself if your friend is like consciously colorist, like being just very direct and explicit, versus if they kind of have a subconscious bias that they aren't aware of or that they're not acknowledging. And so the jokes about skin tone, especially the ones based in stereotypes, are a no-go for me. I will say it is possible to use humor to call attention to colorism. It's possible to use humor to call out the negative impact of colorism. And I'm thinking about a South Asian man who did a stand-up comedy routine called Getting Married While Dark Skinned, or Being Dark Skinned and Getting Married. And so he was using comedy and using humor to like spotlight the negativity that colorism is, right? And so I think there's a way, like humor can be powerful and impactful, but most people who are colorists are just playing into the stereotypes about skin tone and thinking that it's funny, right? Let's see these comments. Sarah Bestwell says, yes, my grandmother always used to say this, mixed babies were the cutest, right? Yeah, that's a fetishization of mixed kids for sure. But then also, I say this over and over and over again. Like, not all mixed people look alike. Like, mixed people are as diverse as just about anybody else. And so the assumption that like, oh, you are automatically attractive or automatically pretty because you are in this category is evidence that it's colorism, because it's not based on like, I actually saw this person and seeing them, I thought they were pretty. Like, you're prejudging people you have never even seen and assigning attractiveness or beauty to them just because of their lighter skin or hair texture. Tiff the Tax Lady. Hey, Tiff the Tax Lady. I like that screen name. Might have to hit you up for some taxes come January. Says, I hated that I was a type because of my skin tone. Yeah. Okay, so you're talking about like with the dating preferences and stuff. Yeah, definitely. It's crazy to me that even in 2021, humanity is still so shallow and superficial, right? And thinking about all the things that matter in making a healthy, successful, productive, exciting, loving relationship, and realizing when you really are mature enough to understand what a relationship takes, skin tone is like nowhere near the priority for you in terms of choosing a partner. Hey, Lucid Lows, what's up? Says, do you feel like some people make dating choices based on how certain skin tones react or treat them as well? So I've heard people say that. Yeah, people have explicitly said, or I don't date dark-skinned men because they don't want me. They don't like me. So I, switched away. You hear a lot of black men in general say, well, I ended up dating non-black girls because all the black girls treated me like I was nobody, or the black girls rejected me, or the black girls couldn't keep it real. And so, yeah, I think we have been wounded sometimes by people who fit a certain description. And that can make it difficult, right, to open up to other people that remind us of those traumas, that remind us of those hurts or those wounds or that negative experience. And that's part of, when I say colorism healing is necessary in order to stop perpetuating healing. So let's say, a dark-skinned person or a dark-skinned man, for example, would treated me really poorly. If I don't heal from that, then I project that onto other dark-skinned people who don't deserve it. And so I think, yes, there are people who consciously make that choice, but the reality is that not everybody who is that skin tone will treat you that way necessarily, even if it's been consistent or been a pattern in your lifetime. I think having the understanding and the belief that it's not because of their skin tone, right? It might be because of other things, social conditioning, like their position in society, but people aren't treating us bad because they're black. They're not treating us bad because they're light skinned or because they're dark skinned. They're treating us that way because of some type of conditioning they've been exposed to or been influenced by. Tiff the Tax Lady and ostracized for my skin tone at the same damn time. Most of the men I have dated were colorists, and I thought I was okay with it. So Tiff the Tax Lady is bringing up a really good point in that I think people who date colorist people are condoning colorism and are contributing to the problem of colorism, right? Like saying no to a colorist suitor, I guess, for lack of better words, is part of the work necessary to dismantle colorism. All right. Good conversation as always. Let me keep going. So I'm going to come back to these. So a fourth red flag, a fourth sign is a very obvious one. One, they generally, like on a regular basis tend to hyper focus on skin tone. And so that hyper focus on skin tone or like hair texture or facial features can come in different forms, right? So you might have a friend, and again, this was left in the comments, you might have a friend who, instead of celebrating the birth of your child, they're like, oh, why is their nose so big, right? Or instead of just being happy for you that you're pregnant, they're like, oh, well, I hope your baby has your hair, or I hope your baby has the same complexion as their father, right? Hyper focusing might be towards themselves. You might have a friend who's like, "Ooh, I can't go to the beach for too long because I might get dark," right? Or, every time they comment on somebody, every time they describe somebody, they're adding in things about skin tone and hair color, right? So the hyper focusing on racial features in that way is definitely a classic red flag that your friends might be colorist. Similar, a fifth red flag is constantly and almost exclusively praising and affirming light skin and or light-skinned people. So you'll have to observe patterns amongst this friend that you suspect is colorist and see if the only people they ever note as being attractive or pretty or cute are light-skinned, right? Do they ever say, oh yeah, the pretty lady who works at the cafeteria, is that person ever a dark-skinned person that they're referring to? Or do they always tend to be lighter-skinned people that they praise and affirm? And even if they're not praising or affirming the physical beauty, right? They might be talking about, oh, so-and-so is so smart. Or they might say, oh, so-and-so is so professional or so nice and good, right? And those people that they find positive traits in, they focus on the positive in light-skinned people very easily and almost exclusively. That is definitely a red flag that there's some colorism there, either subconsciously or consciously, okay? So I'm about halfway through my tips, and I know I left some comments unread. Tip the Tax Lady, those are blanket projections based on trauma. Frances Cress Welsing wrote how racial subconscious thoughts manifest themselves in practice. Absolutely. Like that's the case with all subconscious thoughts, whether they're racial or not. Your subconscious mind controls the vast majority of your behavior and your actions. And we just don't acknowledge that as a culture, right? And all right, Issa Trey says it's interesting when people rationalize hobbies as a reason to date outside of their race. I'm a surfer and Black girls aren't with that. It's like, yes, they are. Yeah, it's Issa Trey, or when they're into comics or anime, etc. Yeah, there's sort of, I think some people call it like alternative Blackness. And so you'll have like Black people who have been told that they're like not like other Black folks, for example, or who perceive themselves to not be like other Black folks, either because they like listen to like hard rock or like heavy metal, or, like Issa Trey is saying they're really into comics. And your point one is that the person you date doesn't have to have all the exact same hobbies as you do, right? But also, if you exist, there are other Black folks like that. And there are, if we're talking about the Latinx community, there are other Latinx people who like comics, right? And so excluding every person in your racial group is a red flag. It is a warning sign that this person is colorist, because you have not met all Black women and you have not met all Black men. So it's fine to say, oh, this person who's in front of me is not a good match, and they happen to be the same race as me. It's different from saying anyone ever in the future, like I'm not even going to consider people of a certain skin tone. That's bias, that's prejudice, right? That's not preference, as people try to call it. Seago Peck says, I had a colorist friend who really hurt my best friend that I had to stop talking to. My best friend was laughed at and ostracized by her when all she did was talk to a guy the colorist person liked. Bruh, that's deep. That's deep. And I know I'm not saying your screen name correctly, but it's spelled, for people listening, it's spelled Ciguapex. That's deep, right? And that almost makes me think about how sometimes if you have a light-skinned friend who has not done their work as a light-skinned person, they are so used to getting their way. They're so used to being centered. They're so used to having people defer to them or be deferential or create space for them or hold space for them or, you know, even being coddled or preferred or supported or defended, right? That if a dark-skinned person dares to also take up space, it's like an affront to them all of a sudden, right? Issa Trey says they relate that with the lack of Black women or men they found interested in the same. Somehow colorist men found me too, and I am dark-skinned, but they tried to make excuses for why I was an exception. Ooh, Lucid Los. Lucid Los. Yes. And they really think, so Lucid Los, they really think they're doing you a favor. And they say, well, I usually don't date dark-skinned girls, but, well, then, bye. You're not doing me any favors. Like, they really think you should be so honored and grateful that they're paying attention to you, that they are, you know, even talking to you. Fam, no thanks. I'm so far behind in these comments. Okay, let me go on to some more warning signs and red flags. So number 6 is the opposite of what I just said about them always and overly like fawning over, you know, light-skinned people and light-skinned features. The opposite of that is that they very quickly and easily assume the worst about dark-skinned people. They very easily stereotype a dark-skinned person. Like they find it so easy to associate negative things with dark skin and or dark skinned people, right? And I had this experience. It was based on race and color, because I think if I were lighter skinned, the teachers would not have perceived me this way. But I remember being in like maybe first or second grade, no, like kindergarten or first grade. It might have been first grade or second, I don't know. Early elementary school. And this white girl called me the N-word, and I hit her. I hit her. And so like we both got punished and all this stuff like that. And so one of the teachers came in, and I was like mad and crying because I was the kind of kid who cried when she got mad. And so this white teacher came in, and y'all, they were like, oh yeah, Sarah and Ashley got in a fight. And so mind you, Sarah is a very common name. So there was another girl named Sarah in my class who was a white girl with like red hair and freckles. And so like the white teacher was like, Sarah got into a fight with Ashley, because she thought the teacher was referring to the white Sarah. And she was like, oh no, not that Sarah, Sarah Webb. And the teacher was like, oh, okay. Now, mind you, I had never gotten into a fight. I had never been violent, never used profanity, like never got in trouble. I might have talked a little bit when I wasn't supposed to, but I had never gotten into trouble, ever. It's not like she was making that assumption based on prior behavior, right? So for her to be like, not Sarah, I can't believe white Sarah would ever do this. Well, no, not her. The other Sarah is like, oh, okay. And like, for some reason, that was easy for her to believe. Like, oh, okay, well, I get that. Yeah, you know, she's the dark-skinned Black girl. And then that ties into statistics about dark-skinned Black girls being suspended 3 times more than light-skinned Black girls, right? So yeah, personal experience from yours truly, even though granted it was decades ago. I still remember it very vividly. But that's what I'm talking about when I say a colorist friend is someone who easily and very often assumes the worst about dark-skinned people. And so that's a red flag and a sign, if you see that pattern recurring in your friendship circle, that they might be colorists. Issa Trey says, my ex did this to me, Lord. When I called it out, I was gaslit like a mofo. Only ever mention light-skinned people in reference to attractiveness or noteworthy descriptor. That's a classic example, Issa Trey. Yes. Thank you for that testimony. Tiff the Tax Lady says, I've noticed that our culture will automatically discuss the skin tone when discussing the physical appeal of a person. Yeah, that is very much an aspect of our culture. I know African American culture for sure. I'm not even going to say Black culture because I don't know if it's as prevalent elsewhere in the African diaspora, but in the United States, yeah, people, even if you, like somebody said, being a type, like if you ask what's your type, they will always say color. They will almost always mention color first, right? Like you said, oh, what's your type? They're not going to say, oh, I like funny people. They're not going to say that. They're like, oh, I like light skins, or I like dark skins, or I like, I don't know, whatever else people like these days. I be giving up on stuff sometimes, y'all. I'm like, I don't care, y'all. Okay, Clouds Blush. Will this be saved? I missed so much joining late. Yes, it's always saved on my IGTV, YouTube, and podcast. Okay, so Tip the Tax Lady says, when did being a sapiosexual make you anti-Black? Ha! Yeah. I'm light-skinned and I cannot relate to being held on a pedestal. Seagull Peck says that really happened. It's okay. The way the screen name is said is fine. Okay. Thank you. And I believe you. I definitely believe that, when y'all leave comments and stuff that y'all are speaking your truth for sure. We have to consider that all light-skinned folks are not Karens. Yeah, that's true. But all light-skinned folks still have a responsibility to work to dismantle the system that privileges them. And a lot of light-skinned people, similar to white people, similar to Karens, or similar to, privileged people of various types, they are content with simply not being mean, right? So like white people are like, well, I'm not mean to Black people, so I'm good, right? I can kind of wash my hands of this racism problem. And so it's not enough just for light-skinned people to be nice to dark-skinned folks. Like you have to be proactive in undoing these unjust systems and these oppressive systems, even when they benefit you. And now there are a lot of people who have been arguing that, light-skinned people don't have any reason to dismantle colorism. I presented arguments as to why they might, but that's for a different live stream. Mellow and Chill, what's up, fam? You don't have to be a light-skinned Karen to still benefit from colorism. Yeah, oh yeah, there you go. Thank you. I like when y'all respond to each other's comments before I even see the comment. Y'all are so on point. Okay, so I have 4 more, and plus a bonus. So let me keep moving right along because I still want to get to the ways to address it, unless I need to save that for a next live stream. We'll see. I'll play it by ear. I'm winging it a little bit. So a 7th red flag, a 7th warning sign is that they make comments or suggestions about, well, you would be so pretty if, or you would look so cute if, or I really like when you wear your hair straight because it's so much more feminine. Or, I don't really think yellow is your color. I don't think it really matches your complexion, right? And so all of those ways, those subtle ways, not so subtle ways of trying to, those backhanded compliments even, right? Like, oh, well, yeah, that color is more suitable to your skin tone than the bright colors. And I'm just like, no thanks. No thanks. I don't need friends in my social group or social circle who think that my beauty is conditional. I don't need those kind of friends. The rest of the world will always be ready to tell me I'm not enough and that I need to police the way I show up in the world to fit in or to be worthy. I don't need that in my friendship circle, right? An 8th warning sign is that they are paranoid about getting darker, right? So light-skinned people might have this paranoia, medium brown-skinned people have this paranoia, dark-skinned people have this paranoia. And I remember talking to a dark-skinned person who was saying how their dark-skinned friend was like, oh, I can't stand getting any darker. I don't want to get any darker, right? And so I did a live stream on internalized colorism, on how dark-skinned people sometimes internalize colorism and we come to hate our own dark skin, or we come to, just dislike dark skin in general. We don't like our own features, right? That's internalized colorism. And so we might see that from anybody, really. And then number 9, so this one is really important, and I think this kind of relates to the comment that Mellow and Chill was responding to about you don't have to be a light-skinned Karen to still benefit from colorism. So number 9, a red flag, and this one pertains to light-skinned people most often, and that's that if your friends choose to remain oblivious to colorism, or if they gladly and willfully accept preferential treatment without calling it out, that's colorism. Your friends are probably colorist, right? And so I remember hearing a story one time about a group of girls who were going out and they were only letting in the light-skinned friends. And so the dark-skinned girls were not allowed into the party or the event or the venue. And so I was like, you're not my friend if you go into a party knowing that they only let you in because you're light skinned and you're fine, you're okay with me not being allowed to go in. We not friends, fam. Like, even if it's not based on colorism, right? Like, friends are like usually the folks who are like, well, if my friend can't come, then I'm not going in either, right? Like, if you're not trying to give the same customer service to my friend, then I'm not going to shop here either. If you're not going to give me a ticket, then why are you giving my friend a ticket, right? Because they're dark skinned. I mean, like a police ticket or whatever. And so I think there are a lot of times when light-skinned people, light-skinned friends, light-skinned cousins, light-skinned coworkers are choosing to be oblivious about the preferential treatment that they're receiving. And I've said this before, but in the minds of dark-skinned people, that's a betrayal, right? Like the example about the light-skinned friends being allowed into the party and not demanding that their dark-skinned friends come with them, and or saying, well, if my dark-skinned friends can't come, then I don't want to participate either. Like, that's betrayal. You are betraying your friends who you're supposed to be your friends, who are darker skinned. And so again, going back to the idea that even though not every light-skinned person is a bully or is saying colorist things like explicitly, those instances where you benefit from colorism and you just accept it, right? Like, it's like, okay, yeah, they're letting me in because I'm light-skinned and I'm just going to go along with it. It's not my fault. Like, I didn't make the rule. I didn't make the policy, but I'm also going to take it, right? Like, that's colorism. That is colorism. And so unfortunately, like, a lot of dark-skinned people have friends and relatives who are light-skinned who don't really stick up for them, who they have these like moments of betrayal. I even use them like, so this is not friendship per se, but like your cousin can be your friend, right? I was talking about like how if you have a light-skinned cousin and a dark-skinned cousin, and the light-skinned cousin gets a lollipop, and they're eating the lollipop, and they see clearly that the dark-skinned cousin didn't get a lollipop, but they're going to take their lollipop and eat it and enjoy it. And they're going to be like eating it in their dark-skinned cousin's face. Like, oh, I don't know why grandma gave me a lollipop and didn't give you one. Oh, well, I'm just glad that I have one, right? Like, that's not okay. And then the 10th red flag is that if your friends are cool with the idea of dark-skinned people being flunkies, then that is a sign of colorism. So what is a flunky? A flunky is a person who only exists to serve and uplift and affirm someone else, right? And so a lot of times you'll see in movies, for example, you'll have like, what do they call that? Like the cheer captain, or like the lead mean girl. And then like she has all these like other mean girls as her background. right? So if you have friends who subscribe to that dynamic of, well, I'm the center of attention and all these people around me who are darker skinned are merely props, are merely around to boost my own ego, right? Or validate my privileged position. That's an instance of colorism. And so I'm talking like kind of abstractly, and it will show up in like specific tangible ways depending on the situation. But I think even the earlier example about the light-skinned friend who laughed at and ostracized the darker skinned friends, right? That's kind of that same dynamic. Like, no, you don't get to be the main character, right? You don't get to be the center of attention. You don't get to shine, right? Like, I have to be the one to shine. And so a lot of times we'll have light-skinned friends who create this dynamic, but then we might also have dark-skinned friends who who treat their light-skinned friends better. I've talked about this before, but I've had dark-skinned people like elevate light-skinned people above everyone else, right? Like, so sometimes it is dark-skinned people who are doing that elevating, right? And trying to put light-skinned people on the pedestal, right? Or trying to help them stay on top of that pedestal. And so I think that's a very dangerous, toxic dynamic that we have to be aware of and be conscious of. And then I have one more, actually, it's a bonus sign that your friends might be colorist. And that is if they dismiss or derail discussions about colorism. Yes, that's a dead giveaway. One of my followers left a comment. They were like, yeah, I had a friend who got really, really mad, or they get really mad. They're in denial. And so they get mad if you call them out on their colorism. I say, yeah, and the folks who get the maddest are usually the most colorist. So you can gauge how colorist your friend might actually be by how mad or upset or angry they get if you point out their colorism. That's your clue. That's your sign. Like, okay, you mad about this because, one, you know you're benefiting from it. Two, because you know you have been perpetuating it. That's the only reasons you would get that mad, right? Okay, so those are my warning signs. I think I'll have time to do my tips. I might go through them quickly though. I do have a blog. I do have blog posts as well. So I have YouTube, podcasts, IGTV, and I also have blog posts where I write out kind of like an outline or transcript of the video too. So lots of places to get this content if you miss it or don't catch everything. Okay. So we don't assume the tip the tax lady. No one assumes that light-skinned folks experience white privilege, but they do experience light-skinned privilege. Clouds blush as if you fighting for yourselves is some commentary on your morality just because you're dark-skinned. Oh, yeah, you're talking about me hitting the girl because she called me the N-word, right? Like, how dare you defend yourself, black person? You're supposed to just take it. You're supposed to just accept our violence and our hatred. So light-skinned people don't experience white privilege because they're not white. But that's more so in the realm of racism. When it comes to colorism, light-skinned people do have light-skinned privilege relative to other dark-skinned people. And that's not the ideology, like that's the concrete, tangible statistics and the research and the actual quantitative data that shows that lighter-skinned people have shorter prison sentences for the same crime, that lighter-skinned people earn higher wages even if they have less experience or less education. They're more likely to be seen as employable, right? As I mentioned, dark-skinned girls being 3 times more likely to be suspended from school than girls with very light skin tone. So that's not just an idea that people have. It's also based in the concrete reality and the systemic inequalities. Like there is inequality but amongst Black people ourselves. And so there is very real privilege that comes with being lighter skinned. I am Shanda Rule. Welcome, fam. Is the fetish-like praise of dark skin also colorist? I often attracted men who only liked the darkest people they could find, but the base of comparison always came back to light skin. So I think that can be a manifestation of colorism for sure, in terms of the dehumanization of you based on your skin tone. So even though it might seem like praise, even though it might seem positive, it is the totalizing you, or categorizing you, or judging you, or labeling you, or treating you a certain way because of one feature, because of that one feature, right? So yeah, I think it's problematic still. I don't know about causes, Tiff the tax lady, but they certainly have light and lighter skin privilege. Colorism predates racism. It's definitely connected to white supremacy. It's not versus. Light skin is definitely put on a pedestal. Privilege needs to be dismantled. So there's something I say often too for Tiff the tax lady, is that you don't have to be aware of your privilege to have it. Praising the oppressed skin complexion isn't colorism, I don't think. No. I agree, Issa Trey. No, but I think it can be fetishized. And so if it's praised as in a dehumanizing way, right? Like, I'm not acknowledging your humanity. I am looking at your skin tone as a source of pleasure for me, right? Like, almost like I would look at a piece of chocolate, like an objectifying you, right? Like, that's when it becomes problematic. Cloud Blush says, fellow light-skinned people, if you're feeling away, listen and check out their page for more info. Centering your ignorance of colorism doesn't help you understand how it impacts dark-skinned folks. Yes, thank you for that. Okay. Thanks, Jandel, for the badge. How far in this discussion have I gone? Lucid Lows, thank you for the badge. I love the support that I get from you all consistently as well. Sarah Bestwell says, this is my major issue with white people. They say, I love everyone. I'm not mean to anyone. Being nice or mean is not the point. If you're not trying to dismantle white supremacy, you are doing harm. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. People think that not doing anything makes them safe, but not doing anything is the equivalent of causing harm. Yeah, I like that framing. Jandel Crutch says, and it's an example of implicit bias. We all pick up these biases against dark skin based on what we see, hear, and read about dark versus light skin. True. All right. Lucid Low says facts, or if they perpetuate it. Let's see. I had a colorist friend. We're both the same color. This is from Clouds Blush. Says who was constantly posting about being lighter, being red bone, and posting pics where her skin is lighter. It was really off-putting and upsetting. Clouds Blush, thank you for those additional behaviors that clue us into whether or not a friend has internalized colorism or is benefiting from colorism or perpetuating colorism. So lighter skinned people hyper focus on their skin tone a lot, and they wear it as a badge of honor. Not all light skinned people, but the ones who do are very vocal and very prominent, especially on social media, right? And there are people who use light skin this or whatever in their screen names, right? I saw someone saying, like, if you talk about your skin tone in your screen name, like Redbone 257, right? Like, that's a sign that you're playing into and perpetuating colorism. Issa Trey says, what's hilarious and very telling is you distracting us from this convo Dr. Webb is having because you're in your feelings. I am Shonda Rule says, a really good friend was colorist until I brought up many of the things you've mentioned. Since we really are besties, that convo totally changed her behavior to this day, nearly 30 years ago. I am Shanda Rule. I am so happy to hear that positive testimony of being able to talk to a friend and have them be open to hearing what you had to say. Because unfortunately, I've heard so many stories where the friendships ended because the friend, the so-called friend, didn't want to hear it. They were like, nope, you're wrong. And not only are you wrong, but now I feel threatened, right? So sometimes light-skinned people will do the same thing that white people do, right? So like sometimes we know white people, when confronted with racism, will say, I feel attacked, right? And so we'll have light-skinned people do the same thing. When confronted with colorism, light-skinned folks will say, I feel judged, I feel attacked, you know? And it's like, no one's attacking you because we're calling out a systemic issue. And also, if the shoe fits, wear it, right? Like a light-skinned person who's truly doing their work has no need to feel judged or attacked, because if you're not the problem, then us talking about the problem wouldn't bother you. All right. Hi, Beas. Soy leche. What's up? Higher vibration is accepting the task of recognizing your skin privilege. There is no way to skip how you benefit from others' oppression and to call it vibing higher. It's shirking responsibility. Well said, Clouds Blush. Lucid Low says, I'm not going to lie, it is very difficult as a dark-skinned woman having friends because that type of mindset is embedded. So you automatically have less value than light-skinned and non-black women because of your color. Yeah, and I'm sad about that, Lucid Los, because I know that it's real talk, you know, that even in making friends, or even your ability to make friends in many instances, is impacted by having darker skin. And then you always have to question, right? Like you always have that in the back of your mind, like, is this friend, you know, having a bad day, or is it colorism? Just like we do with racism, we always have to wonder, like, did the clerk ignore me because I'm black, or did they just not see me, right? It's just like you have to always live with that question. And that's part of the burden of colorism. That's part of the burden of racism, is always having to live with the question, is it because of the way I look? Is it because of my skin tone or because of my race? Jendelle Crutch says, tell him how I used to go off on your kindergarten classmates, Nicole, when she wanted to be my friend, not yours all of a sudden. Yeah, so Jendelle Crutch is my sister. Many of you know this. And there was a non-black person, I think she was white, in my class, who was like, we were supposedly friends. Oh, thank you. That was a good, actually right on point. That was a good topic to bring up. We were supposedly friends, and so we got in an argument. And her way of getting back at me in the argument was to go sit by my sister and be like, well, I like your sister better than you because she's white and you're black. And we were like in, again, third grade, right? So this girl really thought my sister was white. And my sister and I have the same mother and father. So it's not like I'm African-American, she's biracial. Like, no, we're both African-American. And so, you know, my sister's like, no, you're not playing with me, right? And so an example of colorism would have been like, oh yeah, thank you for giving me value and privilege and affirming me at the expense of my darker friend or darker sister, right? And so I think to repair the trust, when we talk about the division between light-skinned women and dark-skinned women in particular, to repair some of that trust, like one necessary step is for us to witness our light-skinned sisters like actively shutting down colorism in those instances, right? Because if my sister had stayed silent in the moment, that would have been an act of betrayal. You know what I mean? And I would have been like, well, she's condoning it, you know? She's supposed to be my friend, she's supposed to be my sister, and she's going along right with it, right? And so one of the reasons why I have such a great relationship with my light-skinned sister, my biological light-skinned sister, is because she doesn't play into or invite or condone the colorism. And yes, she still benefits from it, right? Like she's still like, you can't not have light skin privilege, right? Even if you're actively trying to fight against it, right? And so even her acknowledgement of that, right? It's a lot. It's possible. It is possible to have a light-skinned friend as a dark-skinned person, but it requires a lot of work, especially for the lighter-skinned person in the relationship. It just does, because of the privilege that you have. And it requires established trust and knowing that, for me, like, I can't have a light-skinned friend who's not actively talking about colorism. So a lot of people, when I talk to them about their experiences with their colorist friends, they'll talk about trying to educate their light-skinned friend, right? Like, oh, I had a light-skinned friend, or even a dark-skinned friend, to be honest. And I was explaining to them what colorism was and trying to get them to see, right? And that's fine for like already established relationships. But once I got to a point where, you know, colorism was the focus of my life and career, I was like, I can't even consider you a friend if you aren't already like hip to the game. Like, if you aren't already about that anti-colorism life, then I can't even consider you a friend in that sense. Okay. So much here. I'm definitely going to save my tips for dealing with it next week. Because I don't like to go over an hour and we're already at 2:50. This is really good and deep convo. Sarah Bestwell says, all white or lighter skinned people benefit from white privilege to some degree. If you don't agree, you need to do more work. I have noticed this and it's very hurtful, but no one cares. I care, Lucid Los. I don't know if that makes a difference. Keisha Harris says, dead giveaway. Keisha Harris Hoker. Or it's the automatic, it goes both ways. The automatic, it goes both ways is a form of denial and dismissal. And as a friend, so let me say this too. Like, if you open up your heart as a dark-skinned person and talk about your experiences with colorism, and your supposed friend's immediate response is to say, oh, well, it goes both ways, they're not showing up for you as a friend in that moment, right? That's not how a true friendship works, right? Even if you are feeling some type of way as a light-skinned person, part of your work is to hold space for your dark-skinned friend in that moment when they're opening up to you. But to ignore and to just not listen and to dismiss it by saying, well, I have problems too, like, that's not what friends are supposed to do. And that's just friendship 101, whether it's colorism or you're talking about a bad breakup you had or you got fired from your job. Like, imagine telling your friend that you just got fired from your job and they're like, well, it's hard for everybody. Life is hard for everyone, so suck it up. Right? And yet people think it's okay when we're saying like, oh, as a dark-skinned person, I feel rejected, or, you know, people have mistreated me or devalued me as a darker skinned person, and for their response to be, oh, well, you know, everybody has it hard. I have it hard too. So what? Y'all already know. And I'm not even a therapist. Like, I'm not like a licensed or trained therapist, but I can tell you, like, that's not a healthy relationship dynamic. Let's see. Says Ice Street. I don't know how to say that. I have to dip out, but I hope this live is saved because it is so important and sad in a way that is so easily understandable if a person cares to understand. I appreciate all you share. Thank you very much. It is definitely going to be saved. I don't know if you are still here, but thank you for being here and for participating in the chat. Lucid Low says, everyone notices light skin privilege, but we hardly talk about safe browns and how they can also be perpetuators due to lack of experiencing colorism. Yeah, I think I had a really good poem, like in one of my writing contests, Tahinia Wilson, and she also participated in the contest this year. So she talked about being a safe brown color, right? So she talked about matching the paper bag. She wasn't lighter than the paper bag. She wasn't darker than the paper bag. She was like always right on par with that paper bag. And so, and actually there's some research by Jeffrey Ann Wilder, and in response to an earlier research project by someone else that looked at, you know, the the terms that people had for like people with dark skin, brown skin, and medium skin. And like people were saying how it's safer to be brown skinned because one, you are clearly and identifiably black, but you'll never be accused of being too black, right? And so you don't have to, deal with like the identity issues of like, am I black or am I not? And yet you are never going to be perceived as the wrong kind of black person. And then there's also, with brown skinned people, sometimes it depends on the environment that they're in, right? So a lot of people who are like a medium brown, if they grew up in a light-skinned Creole family in the French Quarter, like it wasn't safe for them, right? Like in growing up, right? But yet that same medium brown skinned person can go to a public school or go to college and be the lighter friend. They can be the lightest one in the room. And so they'll still benefit in that way. And that's a whole topic in and of itself. But thank you for bringing it to our attention. And I'm making a mental note to talk more about that specific dynamic in the future. And I know you have reasons for not being able to come on live, but if you're ever, available, that offer still stands. And one of my good friends, June Chappelle, who I did an interview with for my series on men on colorism, he talks about being brown skinned and knowing that he didn't experience nearly the amount of colorism that his darker skinned peers did. But he also came from a black family that had people with like red hair and green eyes and white skin, right? And so he was very much dark compared to them. And yet he had cousins who were much darker than him. And so it's interesting to see him acknowledge his positioning in that way. All right, folks, let me start wrapping it up. Yeah, being purposely obtuse. And it's funny because I had someone else leave a comment in a similar fashion. And it's like, if you were really trying to listen and understand, then you would come at me a different way. Like you wouldn't come at me the way you're coming at me if you were really here to be open and engage and talk and learn and listen. All right. Yeah, Motown Historian. So I'm trying to get off the live, but all of your comments are so good. I live for y'all's comments. So Motown Historian says also light-skinned people who date cis-het black men need to be responsible for not dating men or calling out the men who they date that are obsessed with their light-skin features, hair, texture, etc. Yes. So that came up a little bit earlier in the live stream. But yeah, dating a colorist person is condoning colorism, and it is a form of colorism. It perpetuates colorism. All right, folks. So thank you all to my folks who participate in the lives week to week, who comment and who show love, who buy badges. Y'all came through strong with the badges today. Did I miss anybody? Let me see. Oh, More Love, let's do this. Thank you, More Love, let's do this for the badge. And I think that's everybody. Lucid Loach, Jandel Crutch, Sarah Bestwheel. Thank you for the folks who tune in each week and the ones who tune in for the first time and who watch the recording, who watch the YouTube video, who listen to the podcast, right? I love y'all so much. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. And yeah, I think, today's live is an example of how, for light-skinned people who get triggered by conversations around colorism, that is your cue that there is work to do, right? In terms of being able to acknowledge privilege, but also not center yourself in the conversation. So part of doing your work as a light-skinned person is to not take up space on a platform created by a dark-skinned black woman, right? And in the particular way that it happened today, right? So it's not like even sending me a DM sometimes, because I get DMs from light-skinned people basically asking me to co-sign the notion that colorism goes both ways, or that light skin privilege is not real. But on a dark skinned Black woman's platform, to sort of derail and distract from the conversation is an act of colorism, right? So I'm just going to call that out right now. And I don't know you personally, but it was rude and disrespectful the way that you did it, right? Because there are other places you can go to kind of start this conversation and unpack this conversation. You don't like interject yourself into a conversation being led by a dark-skinned Black woman and think that that's okay, right? And so definitely check your privilege. Okay. But on that note, everybody, I love y'all. I even love, Tiff the tax lady. I love you too. Like, I believe unconditional love is not about the behavior or the actions of other people. It's an energy that I put out into the world no matter what. So thank you all so much. I'll see y'all next week for part 2 of this, since I didn't get to talk about the ways that we can deal with colorist friends. Mwah. Love you.